Okay, let's look at what an argument is. So, an argument is always a group of statements. In other words, there's going to be at least two statements in any argument, and there might be many more. So let's look at what a statement is first. A statement is a claim that has truth value. We can typically express it as a complete sentence, and it's the kind of sentence that when you hear it, you can say that's true or that's false. Now, it might look kind of strange to say that an argument can consist of false statements, but as long as we agree that an argument can be a bad argument, we have to agree that it's possible for an argument to have false statements in it. But an argument will always make claims that are the kinds of claims that we can evaluate in terms of being true or false. An argument will always consist of one or more what we call premises, and premises are reasons that infer a conclusion. Okay, so an argument might just have one premise inferring a conclusion, or it might have 1,000 premises. There's really no limit to the number of premises that an argument can have, but an argument will always include some statements that are meant to shed light on another statement, the conclusion. So an argument will also have one conclusion, and that would be the point that the arguer is trying to prove. So typically, a conclusion is going to be at least somewhat controversial, meaning there's a need to defend it. And the premises offer the defense. So we always have the premises, which are what we take to be known. They don't have a defense of their own. They're given, and they are meant to shed light on what was previously unknown, namely the conclusion that we are being asked by the arguer to accept. So that's the whole idea of the argument, is to take what is known, deliver those as reasons in order to shed light on what was previously unknown, in order to, of course, grow our understanding. Let's dig into what a statement is by first thinking about what a statement is not. Okay, a statement is not going to be a question, because questions are not true or false claims. So if I ask, where is Everett, Washington? I have not made a statement. A proposal, likewise, is not a true or false claim. If I say, let's go to the movies, I am not saying something that is true or false. I'm just proposing an action. Okay. You might say, let's not go to the movies, but you wouldn't exactly say that I have delivered a false claim. Okay. I've maybe delivered a bad proposal, but that's not the same as a false claim. Suggestions, likewise, are not typically statements. I suggest you do your homework is not a true or false claim. It's just something that I am suggesting. So it's a good or bad suggestion, but not a true or false claim. Commands as well, similarly. Do your homework now is not a true or false claim. It is just a command that has been delivered. And exclamations are not statements. If I say wonderful or fabulous, I'm typically not making a statement there. Okay, so what all these have in common is that they are not true or false claims. So what an argument has are statements, true or false claims. So if we take this sentence, the movie is good and you want to be entertained, so you will have a good time if you go to the movie. This is a single sentence, but contained within it are multiple statements, which we can break up, and we can express each one, which by itself is a true or false claim. So the first statement I can pull out of here is, the movie is good. That's either true or it's false. The second statement I can pull out here is, you want to be entertained. That's either true or false. You either want to be entertained or you don't. And you will have a good time if you go to the movie is a true or false claim as well. So in this one single sentence, I can pull out multiple claims that on their own are true or false. So now let's look at arguments. Arguments are a group of statements with one or some premises, those are the reasons, inferring another, a one conclusion. Okay. One thing we can do with arguments is represent them in standard form, which means listing them with marked premises and a marked conclusion. And the nice thing about this is it really organizes our thinking. We can clearly distinguish what are the reasons and what's the conclusion. And then we can revisit that standard form argument and ask ourselves, do these premises really infer the conclusion? And are the premises actually true? Okay, so this is what a standard form argument would look like. And I'm about to give some examples. But before we look at examples, when we see a passage, okay, one thing that can help us to determine what is being counted as a reason or a premise and what is being counted as a conclusion, one thing that can help us are premise and conclusion indicators. And this list is incomplete. There's a list that is in our textbook that is longer. But words like because imply a premise. When I say because, I'm offering reason. If I say you will enjoy the movie and you say why, I would then offer reason. I would say because it's very exciting, or you've always liked that actress, things like that. Given that is another premise indicator. Seeing that, as, since, being that, for the reason that's when a reason is being provided. The reason being, again, a reason is then provided. These are indicators that we have a premise in the argument. And we can distinguish those from conclusion indicators, which are words that indicate that we have come to the final conclusion. So the word therefore is a popular conclusion indicator. Thus, which implies that, meaning that the premises that preceded that statement imply a conclusion. So the conclusion would follow, which implies that. Consequently, so it follows that, we can conclude that, and hence these are all words that we should be on the lookout for to help us determine what the arguer intends for a conclusion versus a premise. So let's look at some examples. If you start a strenuous exercise regimen before you know if your body is ready, you can cause serious damage. Therefore, you should always have a physical checkup before you start a rigid exercise program. So I want to know what the premise is here, what the conclusion is, and I'm going to think about those indicator words to help me. And a word that jumps out at me here is the word therefore. When that word is used, a conclusion typically follows. Okay, so it seems that the premise is given first. If you start a strenuous exercise regimen before you know if your body is ready, you can cause serious damage. That is just a given. There's no defense for it. It's just given as information that, hopefully we all agree is true. And then we get the conclusion. You should always have a physical checkup before you start a rigid exercise program. Okay, that is the claim that follows the word therefore, and it is the main point that the arguer is trying to convince you to accept. Okay. Another one, income tax revenues help pay for many important social programs, and without that money, some programs would have to be eliminated. If this happens, many adults and children will suffer needlessly. Because of this, everyone, individuals and corporations, should not cheat on their income taxes. So, an indicator word or phrase that jumps out at me here is because of this. All right. And the this that is being referred to is everything that starts out the argument, these claims at the beginning of the passage. And the word because is a premise indicator. So because income tax revenues help pay for many important social programs, okay, that's a reason to accept the last claim here. Okay, so I'm using indicators to help break up this argument, and I can identify 3 distinct premises and 1 conclusion here. So the first one would just be income tax revenues help pay for many important social programs. Premise 2, without that money, some programs would have to be eliminated. Premise 3, if this happens, many adults and children will suffer needlessly. And then the conclusion, everyone, individuals and corporations, should not cheat on their income taxes. That would be the main point the arguer is trying to prove. Now, this one's a more, I think a bit controversial because different people have different views on taxes and the benefits of social programs and so on. So a value of breaking this up into standard form is to first of all just clearly understand what is the argument, what is the claim that is being promoted or supported here. But it also helps us dig into the evidence that's provided. So premise 1, we can then ask us, if we disagree with the conclusion, we can ask ourselves, is premise 1 actually true? Do tax revenues help pay for important social programs? Then we can ask if premise 2 is actually true. Would those programs be eliminated without that money? And then premise 3, if this happens, many adults and children will suffer needlessly. I think people who are opposed to, taxes and social programs, maybe they disagree with 3. They don't think these social programs actually relieve people's suffering. But the point is, breaking this argument up into standard form helps us really dig in to where maybe fundamental disagreements are. Also if the argument is really good, and searching through the premises, you can't find one that's false. It should invite some reflections on whether your former position was actually right, because here's a really good argument that is challenging that perspective, okay, or that belief that you had previously. Okay, now the last example is, since television commercials disrupt the flow of programs, and given that any disruption impedes the continuity of a show, consequently we can safely say that commercials are a bad thing. And this one has many indicators. The word since is a premise indicator. The word given that is a premise indicator. And consequently is a conclusion indicator. So when I break this argument up, the indicators really help me out. Television commercials disrupt the flow of programs. Any disruption impedes the continuity of a show. We can safely say that commercials are a bad thing. Or we might simplify that to simply say commercials are a bad thing. But our indicator words really help illuminate here what are the reasons and what is the conclusion.